Welcome to another episode of the Laura the Library Lady podcast, a production of the Massillon Public Library.
Join us as we celebrate our 125th anniversary during our podcast series, The History of the Massillon Public Library. We've come a long way since the McClymonds Public Library first opened in a house on the corner of historic 4th Street and North Avenue Northeast in 1899. Since then, we've moved to our current home, opened branches in Brewster and Navarre, and added bookmobile and outreach services. In this series, we're going to talk to some voices from the past as we explore our locations. Happy anniversary, Massillon Public Library! Hi, it's Laura the Library Lady coming to you from high atop the Massillon Public Library in our studio. And today I have with me two gentlemen who were employees of the Massillon Museum when it was here along with the library, Eric Myers and Gary Spangler. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you to take a moment to kind of give us some background about yourself. We'll start with Eric.
You're talking outside the museum as well as?
Just lifetime.
Okay.
Who are you?
Well, a native of Massillon, went off to college, swore I was not coming back here, but you see what, they never say never? Yeah, there it is. So I've taught school for 30 plus years and worked here at the museum as an education director for part of that career, but also taught classes just like Saturdays, weekend, weekdays in the evenings for adults. Bleppo the Clown.
Yes, I remember Bleppo the Clown.
Yeah, portrayed him for a number of years as well.
Okay. All right, let's go to Gary.
Well, I'm a native of Massillon too, born and raised, and lived on the west side of town. And I went to Brookfield Elementary. We had 4 classrooms in 6 grades. No principal, no secretary in the good old days.
Oh,
and
my.
I actually walked to school over a mile. But anyways.
Uphill?
Yes, uphill and downhill too. And anyways, I taught in Massillon City. I went to Kent State University, I have 2 degrees from there. I went to Akron, got my master's from there. I taught in Massillon for 33 years, most of the time at the high school. Mm-hmm. But when I did start, I started in the elementary. At that time, we had 10 elementary buildings, and I had 1,500 students every 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
So the trunk of my car was a storage closet. And I taught at the University of Akron. And then after I retired from Massillon, I went to Malone, and I taught there 14 years full-time. And then I was an adjunct for several years after that.
So both of you gentlemen are currently retired?
Yes.
But not
Well,
tired.
Not totally sitting down doing nothing.
Yeah, I know. I'm very involved yet. So Eric, what years did you work at the museum?
I'm going to say that it started early on in my career, so roughly 1983, in that time frame, up until, well, in this building, primarily till it moved. Yeah, so early 90s.
Yeah, so I think they moved around 94, 95.
Right, so it was just before that,
in the new one.
because I was helping to design what that building was going to look like.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Gary, when were you here? I know you overlapped with Eric.
Well, I started my art career here as a student. We had Helen Henley worked here as an art person, and she came out to the schools and gave scholarships to the museum. So when I was in the 4th grade, I was one of 4 students to receive a scholarship. So I came here, and it was fantastic because, number one, I got to ride the city bus to town.
Oh.
I had never done that before. I had to walk a half a mile to get the city bus, but that was okay. And when I left class, if I took my time getting to the bus station, I could stay an extra half hour and see what was going on in town because it was so unique, because living out in the country, it was quite a bit different. And so then I took all the classes from the very basics through the high school program. And I know Mary Merwin at that time hired me to be like an assistant to some of the teachers that were here. And
that was when you were in high school yet?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And the overlap, I guess, is I just continued. After college, my first full-time job, I was a museum assistant. So I did a little bit of everything, from putting up displays, cleaning the cages in the science room, to...
Wait, is that when they had the tarantula?
Yes, and the iguana.
I remember the iguana and the tarantula. I stayed out of that room. How about the bees?
Oh, and the bees that were out that you could watch, had a tube that went out the science room window.
Yeah.
And that was always a highlight for everyone to see the bees.
But you didn't have to clean their cage.
No, we
because
didn't
they
have
were
to do anything with them. Just leave them alone. They took care of themselves, which was very nice.
And that room is now our HR manager's office, so I always find that funny.
Okay.
It used to be the room with the tarantula. And Oscar the skeleton used to live in there, too.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then when I did all that, and then when I started teaching in Massillon, I continued to work here on Saturdays, teaching classes. I would, at a certain point, Mary decided that I could stay in the afternoons and she could take the afternoon off and go home or whatever.
She trusted you.
She trusted me. And so I did that for a good number of years. And so I did that for a long time. I'm not sure exactly when I sort of quit doing that, per se.
Probably, I remember working here and you being here, so maybe around 1990? Early 90s? I'm not sure.
Could be.
Because the current high school opened in 91.
Right. Well, I was still working here a little bit then. Well, it'd be about 90, around there, I'm taking a guess.
Okay. That's been a long time ago.
That sounds like a good idea.
I only bring that up because opening a new building is not a small task.
Oh,
right.
No.
Yeah, so you guys were involved at the high school with the new building there.
Correct.
And then when the museum got its new building, and I believe they opened in 96 down the street from us here.
Yes.
So that was kind of a big time of
transition.
Entities
right.
moving.
Oh, everybody was doing things.
It was exciting.
Yes.
So you talked about Mary Merwin being the director at the time that you started. Anybody else from the staff that you can remember you want to?
Well, I can remember Albert Heiss.
Oh, can you?
Yes.
The previous director.
The previous director. And I was looking up some stuff, and Albert was one of the original curators of the museum.
When it opened.
When it opened, from the very beginning, what's the 36?
1933.
33 or something like that. And I didn't realize he was that young, I'll say, when I started.
He seemed a little older to you because you were young?
Because Albert was very nice, a little bit on the heavy side, and I know when he would come up the steps every time, he always sort of hoped that the railing would stay in place, which it always did. And I know finally after a few weeks, he said to me one day, he says, Gary, you're a pretty nice young man. And he really didn't talk too much, but he did say that.
Well, that was nice of him.
Yes.
Now, you do worry about, the old house.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, maybe the steps are creaking a little bit more, but did you find that it was challenging or you had any problems when you worked at the museum when it was here, being in such an old building that was built to be a home?
Well, the only problem was when we started to have classes upstairs in the front room, carrying 6-foot tables up the steps.
Oh, that would be an issue.
And making that corner at the top of those steps.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge. But otherwise, it wasn't too much of a problem.
Good. I think a lot of people around town really have fond memories of coming to art classes like you did and like you both taught here. I know I took photography in the basement here when I was 12 with John Corns.
Okay.
I remember him. And I know I took a lot of classes with Kathy Starr. And then we were just talking before we started about the Morrison building, which was a house that was next door.
Yes.
And that was also utilized for classrooms. What kind of things did you do in there?
Well, you'd go in it was primarily youth classes that I'm remembering. And there was a ceramic studio in the back portion of that.
Right, yes, there was.
And that's where I would teach the adult classes in the evenings.
So you taught pottery in there, in
Correct.
the Morrison building.
Right, but youth classes, because it was a railing, I can remember, across, when you were on the first floor, when you first walked in, up, you'd have to go up a set of steps, and there was a railing across that space. So you were doing 2 classes, and so...
One up and one down? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, it was like an open classroom setting.
Right.
From one class to the next. And so, you just got the kids' attention. And the nice thing, too, was those kids were there because they wanted to be there. This wasn't a requirement. It was. And so having another class right within hearing
arms,
distance, was not really an issue. Those kids were like, oh, they're learning that, but I this is what I'm interested in. So they were focused on what we were doing within that class space.
Nice. And I kind of remember the front of the building. Maybe it had been a store. Like
yes,
it was sort of a storefront.
It was a music store.
Oh, okay.
It was a Morrison music store.
Okay. So that's why it kind of had that open
all that glass and
part.
Stuff in the front, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Harrison room is currently our outreach department and bookmobile storage.
Okay.
But I also remember a ton of classes being down in the Harrison room.
Yes.
And that's where we would do like Girl Scouts, wanting to earn a badge.
Uh-huh.
So they would come in after school, and we'd do classes with them. And I think most of the adult evening classes, at least the ones I was working with, were in that kind of like the kitchen kind of space that was...
Yeah, they did enamel back in there.
Right, and we did photography in there. It was just, it was kind of a specialized...
jewelry in there.
Next to the Harrison room?
Back is what the kitchen.
Like you come down the steps from the main floor, come down the steps, straight ahead was an office. And then to the left of that was...
Oh, that kitchen. Okay.
That kitchen, yeah.
I know where you're talking about. It's it would butt up against Lincoln Way behind the planters, and it's currently the programming offices.
Okay.
And that's where I had photography because it was like a kitchen. There was a sink and...
Right.
Yeah. Because at the bottom of the steps to the right was like what I would refer to as costume storage.
Oh.
And that used to be the Pioneer Kitchen.
Yes, that was displayed as Pioneer Kitchen because it has a fireplace, and it's still there today. The fireplace is still there, but I think they have books stored in it.
But at one point, it got transitioned over to where that's where a lot of the clothing that had been, from different time periods.
All the collections of the museum.
Right.
Wow, okay. Yeah. Well, I do remember the pop machine.
Oh.
I remember where the pop machine was, outside of that kitchen area. So I think a lot of people probably...
Right across from the bathroom.
I was going to say, a lot of people remember that little restroom underneath the stairs.
Yep.
Yes.
It's still there.
And a story to tell about the little restroom. If you went in, usually you locked it.
You would hope.
Well, I taught a lot of the 3- and 5-year-old kids, and sometimes they would lock it, and then when they go to leave, they didn't know they had to unlock it. So they would be in there crying.
Oh, no.
So I had to go get a hammer and screwdriver, and luckily the hinges were on the outside.
So you could pop the pins out.
Oh, my goodness.
Take the pins out and get the kids out.
Oh, wow.
Because you couldn't talk them through unlocking the door because they were in panic mode.
Well, and that was kind of a hard bolt to
the
do.
thumb screw type thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that happened more than once.
I can imagine. Oh, my goodness. Well, they've just now finally renovated that restroom, and it sadly no longer has that wallpaper that talked about stagecoaches and whatnot on it.
Oh, yes.
Which I always enjoyed, that wallpaper in there. And, I had people who would come and visit when my office was down there more recently, and sometimes they would just get this look in their eyes like they remembered it. They remembered coming to class there. They remembered the wallpaper, the restroom, just those little weird things that you remember being a kid coming to art class and that kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit about how the library and museum were sharing the building, but very separate to begin with. We were talking about that before we started here. Was it just the norm that...
Yeah, well, when I started, it was basically the norm. We were basically separate. And I know Mary Merwin, as the director, she would work. She was part of the library board, I guess, at that time. Or she was a member of it, or whatever.
Or hired by them, or
right. Yeah. Because I know when I was hired, I had to she took me to that meeting. I was officially hired at that meeting.
Oh, by the library board, and you had to go to the meeting and show yourself?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, and we were all, it was just, the library sort of did their thing, and the museum did their thing.
But they were under the same auspices from the sound of it.
At least the board of trustees,
The board of trustees, right. Mm-hmm.
But they each had their own director and each had their own.
Because Ethel Conrad was the head librarian at the time I was hired.
Right, okay. And she was here till 1982. So.
Okay. And then Leslie?
Camille Leslie became the director.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can remember working here in the 80s, being a teenager, and you had to, if you were at the museum and you wanted to go to the library, you had to go outside.
Right.
Go around, go in the other door. But then at some point, they decided they were going to pop open the door and let people go through, which was very different. And we were trying to remember what year that might have been. I think we decided somewhere around the 1990, possibly, or?
It would have been early 90s because I retired in 2000 from the high school.
Then you have to count backwards from there?
Yeah, count backwards from there. So I bet it was early 90s, you think, Eric?
I would bet, because when 1991, while I was the education director, we were just starting to, because Sherry was not yet in charge, but I remember working.
Sherry Brown worked here as the reference librarian.
Right, and I remember having to go over to talk to her, and at first I got this odd look like, where did you just come from? It's almost like it was a Harry Potter, magic door thing. Oh. I don't know.
But you came through the door?
I came through the door and just walked over and talked to her and then went back and closed the door.
Wow, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, didn't really think about it. Yeah,
it was just one of those things that was how we always did it, and then it changed. I was like, oh, okay. So something that's kind of funny. Nowadays, I think we still get questions from people, sometimes people who used to live here and have moved away a long time ago, who come here to the library and they want to know where the museum is because they think it's still here. Even though, it opened in 1996 down the block, they still think it's here. And so that always amuses me because I'm like, no, like 30 years ago it moved. So, but they remember it so well.
Well, it's like they still call it the new high school.
Well, that's true. But you said it opened in 91?
Right.
Yeah. I remember I voted for it. I voted for the levy.
Good.
When I was pregnant with my oldest. And then by the time he got there, I think the roof leaked. So, one of those things. But anyway, some of the rooms here at the Duncan House, at the museum, you mentioned we were talking about the science room. What were some of the other rooms here used for?
Well, the Massillon room is what we called it when I was here. That's where they had all the furniture, and we would change it like every year.
Top of the steps to the left.
So that's now our library director's office, and so that would be displayed like a different type of a home.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes it was a bedroom, other times it was...
Like a music room, because we had the piano they would put in there and so forth. And then this was the gallery.
Yeah, our studio now.
Mm-hmm. And then on the first floor, both rooms that had the cases in them were for art display, artists and their displays of things.
Okay, that's our local history and genealogy section now.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember the annual art show, I think that the museum
Stark County
had.
Artists.
Maybe that's what it was at the time. Or maybe it was the sidewalk sale that I'm thinking of. The
sidewalk sale in June?
Yes. The museum always had a sidewalk show because I remember being a kid and doing like mural paintings outside on the street. And
whatever the theme was, and one year we had seashore or something like that. And I know my dad was a fisherman. He caught a lot of bluegill. So he caught me some bluegill, and we did rubbings of live bluegill.
Of live bluegill?
Yes. The kids thought it was great.
Oh, and then you put them back in the bucket?
They were sort of dead at that point.
Sort of?
But, because whatever the theme was, they would, the whole sidewalk was devoted to that theme. Now, I know that one year we did the circus theme, and do you remember the giraffe in the children's room?
Yes, there was a big giant papier-mâché giraffe head.
I had my kids at the high school. We made circus animals, and we made that giraffe. He was, I think, 12 feet tall.
It was a whole giraffe?
It was the front, from his front legs,
Oh.
front legs, chest, and neck.
Oh, my goodness.
And I know when we were building it at the high school, we were having trouble with the head connecting to the neck. And the neck was big enough that, and I was small enough, I crawled up into the neck, and I held the head and the neck together so the kids could get that connected the way it should be.
Oh, my goodness.
And at that time, who walks in the room but the principal? And, of course, where's the teacher? Oh, inside the neck.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you were very trusting. You trusted your students not to just papier-mâché you right into that and leave you in there.
And so we made a seal, we made a monkey, we made a couple of other animals, circus animals. And they were a pretty good size, and I never thought about getting them out of the high school. Well,
it's like building a boat in your basement.
You don't take a 14-foot giraffe out the door that's not made for that. So luckily, those old windows in that old building,
they had a center pinion. They'd swing, right.
At the old high school.
At the old high school. So we just lowered everything out the second floor window, and the kids were down outside, and we walked them right over here. And
because it was just right down the road.
Right. And so when they were done with the sidewalk show, the children's department at the library took the giraffe and
put the head up above
Put the head up, for years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because then we'd have to try to dust it.
Yeah.
It was up there pretty high. So do you have any special memories about anything that went on here, or any places in the building or other people?
The place that I thought were right at the top of the steps on the gallery, the room we're in now, that level, straight ahead was where Margie Vogt had her office.
With the little Dutch door, with the half door?
Yeah. And there was a staircase inside that.
Yes.
And just being able to go up those steps and to see where the pediment is over the front entrance of the library.
Yeah.
First time I got to see that, I was like, wait, where am I?
I'm
and just
up in the triangle part.
Yeah. No, I knew it was a pediment, but, the art training. But anyway, just seeing that space, because it's one of those, most people don't see that.
No, most people don't get to go into the attic, let alone.
And so just being able to go up there and go, oh, this is pretty neat.
And there's a good view from that office, too.
Right.
And nice view from up here in the gallery studio where we are now.
Right.
In reference to the staircase that Eric's talking about, I know at Halloween time I would always have these great stories to tell kids, and I usually taught the little kids. The 3 and 5-year-olds I loved them. There's no doubt about it. But anyways, Rella Potts was our catalogist at that time.
I remember her name, Rella.
And she worked in the library too.
Okay, that's why I know her name.
And anyways, so she worked here in the mornings and Saturdays, and then she went to the library in the afternoon, I think.
Oh, boy.
But anyways, so I had the kids in the morning, and I was telling them about, we had a special person that lived in the attic.
Oh.
So I would bring them all up, and we would go. And at that time, Mary had her office in where Margie was. So we all crowded in there, and Rella would make a, no! I'm here. What do you want, Gary? And it was just, and those kids would just look and stare, and it was such a wonderful experience for everybody.
And nobody fell backwards down the stairs in fright or anything. That's good.
No, it was fantastic. It was really nice.
So they had a lot of fun.
Oh, yes. We sure did.
So I know that we mentioned, a lot of people having very fond memories, probably of, Halloween parties and things like that when they came to the museum. But what about, maybe some gallery openings or any adult artists or anybody you remember?
I think the adult Christmas party was always a very good success. At that time, we could still burn the one fireplace downstairs. So we would always light that and burn it. And the ladies, I don't know how they did it, but they served the most wonderful food. They brought up from what at that time the kitchen was really bad. There wasn't really much of a kitchen, but they had the best food and hors d'oeuvres or whatever they served.
I know the museum had some small cookbooks that they published.
Yeah, and
their women's board recipes.
And those were very well attended parties for everybody. It was really a nice evening.
And the museum's just grown so much, and outgrown the building and moved and everything, but still a great partner, downtown here for everybody, including the library. So I think Massillon's very lucky to have such a great museum and library.
They are, compared to other facilities. I think we have a wonderful library and a wonderful museum. The people in this town are so lucky and so fortunate to have a facility like that, because you are not going to find it anywhere else. They are so welcoming. They care. They're concerned, and they do things for the community.
Yeah.
Which a lot of places do it for the members only.
True. Yeah, because the museum's always been free admission, and they do so much. And I think really believe in bringing culture and art and history to our area.
I think the fact that the two entities physically split was a natural progression. Just because as time marches on, there's more things to add to the collection.
Right.
And as technology has changed, the library needed some additional space to be able to do what the library does. Right. So I think it just made good sense. To have that. I know the libraries, because I manage the Lincoln Theater now, and the library's been a great resource, because when we have to license a movie if we're going to show it, but it's our responsibility to come up with the DVD to play it. So it's like, well, let's just walk up the street to the library and see what they've got.
See if we can get that movie.
Because yes, we have to pay the license, but we still have to come up with a copy of it of our own.
Right.
So if we don't have to purchase that. That's because, we're all nonprofits.
Right.
So all these nonprofits are all helping each other meet their mission.
Yeah. And Eric, are you still involved at Spring Hill Historic Home?
I just finished my term on the board.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm away from there for a little bit right now.
I'm sure you'll go back.
I have no doubt. But yeah, so I've just because of, you have terms last for, and that's intentional, just so that there's always fresh ideas happening.
Yeah, and I mentioned that not only because it's another cultural organization here in our community, but also because the library is the home of the Roach Wales papers, the collection, the historical collection of papers of the builders of Spring Hill. So I'd like to tie that in case people didn't know that.
Right. Another thing that I would like to add would be, when I was teaching at the high school, since we were just a couple of blocks away, whenever we had exhibits that pertained to what we were doing, our class periods were long enough. We could walk over here, see the exhibit, discuss it, and walk back in one class period. So I did that frequently.
Can you imagine trying to do that today with permissions and all those things about trying to leave the school building?
It would be difficult.
Yeah, it was different back then.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming in and giving us your time and sharing your memories with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. For me as well.
Thanks for listening to the Laura the Library Lady podcast. Be sure to check out the rest of the episodes on the Massillon Public Library's YouTube channel. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms.